Today we start talking about arguments against the existence of God. The last problem we will look at is the problem of hell. This is a problem dear to my heart because I wrote a book on this that was published in 1992. So as you will see, when we talk about problems and issues in a particular field in philosophy of religion, and this goes for philosophy more generally, the way I think about things is in structural terms. So the first thing to do is to get clear on the logical space of the issue and what options there are within that space. So if we think about the problem of hell, we need to start with the question of the logical space concerning the problem. Here, I think we can make some progress by first looking at the standard or a standard typical view in the history of Christianity. I call it the strong view of hell. Now, there are variants on the strong view that are maybe stronger, maybe equally strong, but slight variations of it. But I think the strong view gives us insight into the fundamental features of the problem of hell. So here's the strong view of hell. It involves four distinct theses. The first thesis is the population thesis. The population thesis tells us there are, unfortunately, going to be people in hell. Denizens of hell, inhabitants of hell. Hell is not a completely empty place. That's the population thesis. Second thesis, the no escape thesis. Once you're in hell, there's no possibility of getting out. Whatever else is true about hell, escape is not a possibility. So first, population. Second, no escape. Third, conscious existence. So the standard typical view of hell is that the denizens of hell, the inhabitants of hell, are conscious. Now, this thesis is weaker than the standard pictures we get in literary sources about what hell is like, with fire and burning and weeping and gnashing of teeth. Think about Jonathan Edwards' sermon, famous sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. It contains imagery of each of us hanging over a fiery pit with God having a pair of scissors about to cut the thread and send you into the fiery pit. Right, now that's gripping imagery. No matter how you think about it, it is gripping imagery. But the conscious existence thesis is entailed by it, but not as exaggerated as it. So there may be moral problems with the fiery pit, the flame that does not die out, the worm that's not consumed. All of those things may have special moral problems associated with them. But the conscious existence thesis isn't committed to anything like that. It's just committed to the continued existence of a conscious sort by the people who are inhabitants of hell. Finally, the fourth thesis is the punishment thesis. The punishment thesis explains the other three in terms of the need for punishment, retribution, what a person deserves on the basis of their earthly life. The punishment thesis is, in my view, the underlying rationale for the other three. It claims that what justifies hell, or the purpose of hell, has to do with the need for punishment, the need for retribution, what a person deserves And that's what calls for the doctrine of hell. Now, notice that this thesis forces the account or justification of hell to be backward looking in time. If you're inclined to think about the right way to treat people and the right way to conduct your life in terms of taking into account future consequences of your actions, who's going to be harmed, who's going to be benefited, if you take those sorts of things into account, you'll be a bit surprised to see that nothing like that can apply to the strong view of hell. Whatever the justification of hell is, it can't be forward-looking. It has to look backward in time. And that's in part due to the no escape thesis and other features like that. But the punishment thesis is retributive justice at work. It's backward looking. What calls for the particular features that hell involves is something that happened in the past. Now that makes the problem of hell especially difficult. So evil in general is a problem, but hell is a very special kind of problem. Some bad things that happen to people turn out to be perhaps essential for their overall well-being in the long run. But that's a future-oriented factor about the presence of evil. The suffering of hell, the presence in hell, that whatever negativity is involved in being consigned to hell, is not something that is justified by something in the future. Whatever is going to justify it, it can't be a future-oriented thing. That makes the problem of hell especially difficult in comparison to other ones. What are the options in dealing with it? Here I think we get a better picture of what the logical space of the problem of hell looks like. So think about the standard responses to the strong view, the standard alternatives to the strong view in the history of Christianity. Each of them relinquishes one of the four theses that I just described. So, for example, the first thesis was the population thesis. There will be some people in hell. Universalism is the thesis that, in fact, everybody will be saved. Everybody will end up in heaven. There will be no people in hell whatsoever. Now, there are two versions of universalism, a contingent version and a necessary version. The necessary version says it's just flat out impossible that anybody ends up in hell. The contingent version says, no, it's not impossible, but it won't happen. It's just a contingent truth about reality as God has created it, that none of the people, none of the possible things that end up in hell would in fact end up there. Okay, that's the population thesis. What about the no escape thesis? Well, here we have versions of second chance and multiple chance theories. Look, you went through this life, you had a chance, you made a bad choice, you ended up in hell, and now we plead with God, give him another chance. All right, now, I call it a second chance theory because that's the way it's typically characterized. You end up in hell and you go, oh crap, this is not very good. I made a bad choice, let me fix it. But of course, second chance theories can quickly iterate. So if you make a bad choice the second time around, then there's, oh, give him a third chance and a fourth chance. So maybe it becomes an infinite chance view. So there are two different versions of technically what I'm calling second chance views, and that's where you get one more try and only one more try, or maybe the justification for a second chance keeps coming back no matter how often you make another bad choice. And so you end up with an infinite choice option alternative to the no escape thesis. A third possibility, remember the third thesis was the conscious existence thesis. Views that deny the conscious existence thesis are sometimes called conditional immortalism views, sometimes annihilationist views. So the idea is immortality is a gift for the redeemed, for the people who don't end up in hell. Hell is just a metaphorical description for non-existence, or something that involves non-existence in its conceptual understanding. Finally, the fourth thesis is the punishment model itself. It describes what is essential, what is the fundamental grounding principle for the strong view. And there is an alternative to that to be found in the literature too. It's called the choice model. So instead of saying the reason you're in hell is because you did something that deserves it, the choice model says you're in hell because this is fundamentally what you prefer to anything else. Now, if we view the punishment model and the choice model as the essential components for alternatives, it looks like any simple alternative to the strong view of hell is going to face whatever problems the strong view of hell faced as well, unless it drops the punishment model. Because it's the punishment model that creates the special problem of hell. So that makes people who want to focus on the problem of hell most inclined to drop that one, the fourth one. So when we look at the 20th century, what kind of people, what kind of theorists have dropped the punishment model of hell? Well, C.S. Lewis, for example. Lewis says the doors of hell are not locked from the outside. They are instead locked from the inside. It is something of your own making that you are there for however long you're there. Now, maybe that's a second chance view. Maybe it's something more than a second chance view, but it's not like on the basis of what you deserve. The doors are locked and the key is thrown away. So one defender of the choice model is C.S. Lewis. With respect to other ones like the universalism views, universalists include John Hick, Keith DeRose, Thomas Talbot, and historically Origen is a famous universalist in the history of Christian thought. What about annihilationism or conditional immortalism? Now, it turns out that this has a fairly significant Lutheran flavor to the view. So, for example, Luther held such a view. He was an annihilationist. It was also held by Thomas Hobbes, endorsed by John R.W. Stott in the 20th century, endorsed by N.T. Wright. And it's also to be found in the Church of England's Doctrine Commission report in 1995. On the Lutheran connection, Luther, as I said, defended the view. In the 20th century, so has Oscar Kuhlman, a famous theologian of the 20th century, and Clark Pinnock, a famous evangelical theologian from the last quarter of the 20th century and into the 21st century. That concludes our discussion of problems for the existence of God, arguments that can be developed from three sources against the claim that there is a God. For the rest of the course, we turn to metaphysical doctrines concerning the nature of God and religion and other things. So we here put the epistemology behind us, though in the next lecture, the next general lecture that's not on specific readings, I will talk in summary terms about the epistemology of religious belief and what to make of the situation with respect to the arguments for and against that we've looked at and the prospects for them.